on Saturday in the epic failure for the Colts, the big comeback for Minnesota as they overcame a 33-point halftime deficit. It was without Jonathan Taylor on the field. And according to Ian Rappaport, we may not see Taylor for the rest of the season. So, Pete, the Colts are obviously out of playoff contention for the most part. They're still mathematically live, but I don't think anybody expects them to win the AFC South. And so looking at what Zach Moss did and what Deion Jackson did, how do you see this backfield shaping up for the rest of the season, starting with the Week 16 game Monday night against the Chargers?
Well, I can honestly say that Jonathan Taylor going out after the first play may have cost me a chance to earn myself into the one league I play in into the semifinals. So I have that going for me. But as far as the Colts, look, it makes sense to not let him play the rest of the way. What's the point? He's got a high ankle sprain. You'd be pushing it in that timeline anyway. So look, you give the ball to Moss. Moss looked good the other day. I thought he ran the ball hard. He thought he ran the ball tough. And then Jackson's capable. We've seen him do it as well. So, look, is there a drop-off? Absolutely. If you had to pick one of the two up in fantasy, I'd probably pick up Moss.
Adam, what we saw was, again, a team that had a surprising lead. And so Moss had 24 carries, Deion Jackson 13 carries. They did a nice job in terms of just getting production. Deion Jackson catching a 1-yard touchdown. So looking at both, they're both widely available. Who are you trying to pick up first, knowing that they're probably chasing points against the Colts and probably chasing points the rest of the season?
Well, are they chasing points? Look, they've been pretty competitive with Jeff Saturday. They always lose, but other than the Dallas game, they've been very competitive, and that has allowed them to average 27 running back carries per game in their last 5 games. So if you think back to when Jonathan Taylor missed time and Deion Jackson was very good, it was a lot of PPR. It was a lot of catches out of the backfield. They're not throwing to the running backs anymore. They're throwing to the running backs fewer than 5 times per game with Jeff Saturday. They run the ball like crazy. Can they do that against the Chargers, one of the worst run defenses? I think they'll be able to do that enough. I would go with Zach Moss. He was playing more than Deion Jackson. I wish it were Jackson. I'd be more excited about Jackson, but especially after the fumble. After the fumble, Jackson didn't see the field, and Moss had 6 extra carries after that Deion Jackson fumble. It was pretty even before that, but I would favor Moss, and I actually think we might have a starting running back in fantasy if you're a little bit desperate here. If it were only one of these guys, I like him a lot. I think they're going to split, but I think Moss will have more running downs work, maybe even more passing downs work, and they do want to run the ball a lot. I can tell you that. They're one of the most run-heavy teams since Saturday took over. They're going to try to do that against a bad run defense.
Yeah, that's right. They're playing the Chargers on Monday night, and so we'll see. Again, nothing official on Taylor, but it just seems like, as Pete alluded to, with the Colts out of playoff contention, why would they risk rushing him back with a high ankle sprain? So plan on Zach Moss being somebody that you're going to add and add very prominently heading into Week 16. We'll spend a lot more time on Tuesday's show when we get into all of our waiver wire options. The Cardinals are going to most likely have to make a decision on their quarterback for Week 16 because Colt McCoy left the Week 15 loss against the Broncos with a concussion. So they're down Kyler Murray, potentially down Colt McCoy. So, Pete, I don't know how much you got a chance to see Trace McSorley because we're watching a lot of games on Sunday, but if he's forced to start, how bad is that for the Arizona offense?
It's horrible. They might actually make the Bucs look good. I mean, they were terrible. He was terrible. I mean, he threw the ball all over the place. He wasn't accurate with his passes, and I think he's a major problem. So if he has to play, an offense that hasn't been great to begin with will be a problem as well. I mean, he was bad, and I don't think they can expect him to step in there and do even the things that Colt McCoy can do. He can move around a little bit. He does have that ability, but the 2 interceptions were terrible. I thought he really played poorly when he went in there, but in fairness to him, probably didn't get much work at all with the ones, and then no idea he's going to play. They threw him in there, so there is that, but I just don't think he's very good right now.
Adam, how confident are you going to feel against the Buccaneers when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown? Brown has been terrible in the 3 games since DeAndre Hopkins came back from suspension. Obviously, the quarterback play clearly has a lot to do with that as well. But Hopkins had 7 for 60, no touchdowns on 11 targets from both quarterbacks. So what's your outlook on the receiving core there for Arizona if McSorley is forced to start?
I kind of feel like that's what we might end up with, something like 6-7 catches for 60 to 70 yards, probably a low chance of a touchdown. I sort of compare it to Tyreek Hill this year. Amazing with Tua, perfectly fine with Teddy Bridgewater, terrible in the one game that Skylar Thompson played against the Jets. So I think that's kind of what you're going from. Kyler to McCoy to McSorley, it's just getting worse and worse. I'm going to have Hopkins as a number 2 wide receiver this week. I think he's going to be an okay start in PPR. I'm expecting something like 13 to 14 PPR fantasy points. But I do think when you think about, say, Devontae Adams last year with Jordan Love, think about Justin Jefferson in that one game that Kirk Cousins missed, like I said with Tyreek Hill earlier this year, it's a possibility for a terrible game. I wouldn't rule it out. But I think you'll have about a 13, 14-point game.
A little easier to get away from Marquise Brown, but very difficult to bench DeAndre Hopkins. So, yes, you're just downgrading him. And I think when you look at your semifinal matchup, you just say, okay, I don't expect DeAndre Hopkins to win it for me, but hopefully the floor will still be okay. So again, you're still starting him, like Adam said, most likely a number 2 wide receiver, unless of course your team is just loaded, and we'll talk about some of the start-sit options later in the week. So the Ravens are hoping to get Lamar Jackson back. It's a couple of different quarterback storylines that we're following. And so going into Week 16, Pete, this offense has been absolutely miserable. Since Jackson's injury, which occurred in Week 13, the Ravens have totaled 2 touchdowns in 3 games. The last time the Ravens recorded a passing touchdown was Week 12, which was Jackson to Josh Oliver. And Baltimore's been held to 16 points or less in 3 straight games. So how much do they need Lamar Jackson back to take on the Falcons this week?
Well, it wasn't like he was lighting it up when he was playing the last couple of weeks either. I mean, you talked about that was Week 12. I think that was against Jacksonville. He missed a bunch of shots in that game. Should have had a couple more touchdown passes. He didn't play well there. And in the first quarter of the game he went out, he didn't play well. So the passing game is a major concern. And when you can't pass the football, the moral of that story is you're not going to score points. They ran for almost 200 yards against Cleveland and didn't score. What's that tell you? The importance of the passing game. So they badly need Lamar Jackson back. Look, even if he's not at 100%, he has the ability to make some plays and hit some passes down the field, because right now their passing game is so limited that even when you rush for 200 yards, you score 3 points. You can't win that way in the NFL.
Adam, I know obviously Lamar Jackson is going to hopefully help Mark Andrews, but do we have a Mark Andrews problem? I mean, he's got no touchdowns since Week 6, 7 PPR points or less in 3 games in a row. How much of that is Huntley? How much of that is teams just taking away Mark Andrews, or just, do you expect that Lamar Jackson coming back will sort of save Mark Andrews at this point?
So I think he'll go back to being in the 50, 60-yard range, kind of similar to what I said about DeAndre Hopkins, but fewer catches. I think you'll probably get about 10 to 12 PPR fantasy points from Mark Andrews. Always a chance for a touchdown. I think he's definitely going to save him from having these horrible games, right? I mean, it's going to be better than it was with Huntley. Just to Pete's point, though, I want to point out Lamar Jackson in his last 8 games, not including the one he left with an injury, he was the number 17 quarterback per game. He was on a 17-game pace of fewer than 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. So he was not lighting it up, and neither was Mark Andrews. But I do think you'll get, a guy that's going to be ranked in the top 5 that you're going to start. How many trustworthy tight ends do we have? This is still Mark Andrews, still Lamar Jackson. I consider him a must start, but I don't think we're going to get the 100-yard and a touchdown league-winning game that we were getting earlier this season.
Just real quick, do you consider Lamar Jackson still a must start, given the fact of the numbers you just mentioned? And it is a great matchup, though, against the Falcons.
Yeah, he had a pretty tough schedule in that 8-game stretch. You hope the Falcons could wake him up a little bit. I do think he's a low-end start, not a must start, because I cannot sit here and say I'm confident that he's 100% healthy. That's one thing we have to keep in mind.
Right. He may not be running to the same level because of that knee injury. And speaking of running, we got a guy that's chasing him right now from a record standpoint. So Justin Fields got to 1,000 yards rushing in Week 15 in the loss for the Bears. And so what we have right now, if you take a look here, based on NFL history, Lamar Jackson, clearly one of the best running quarterbacks we've ever seen, Michael Vick as well. Justin Fields right now is 207 yards away from breaking Lamar Jackson's rushing record. He's got 3 games to do it. So, Pete, I know you don't love the runaround quarterbacks, as you call them, but clearly he's had a very fantastic season for fantasy managers. When you look at Justin Fields, just your take on his season right now and how much that rushing has been so much a part of his game and been so successful for his game as well.
It's interesting, that graphic, you look at it, we're talking about Lamar Jackson's struggles throwing the football. Michael Vick at times had struggles throwing the football. Bobby Douglas couldn't throw the football at all. He was a terrible passer. And Justin Fields is growing as a passer, and I think that's to be the biggest difference for Justin Fields than those guys. He will become a good passer. He's got the ability to do it. And I think we saw a couple plays on Sunday where he got outside the pocket, he kept his head up, and he made some throws down the field. He's not there yet in terms of going through all his progressions and getting to the 3rd and 4th read, because he does have the ability to take off and run. And I know that's exciting, and I know it's a bit of a crutch for a young quarterback. But you see little bits and pieces where he's getting better and better throwing the football. So I think when you look at this in a couple years, you're going to look back on this season and say, yeah, he ran out of necessity. He ran because it was a crutch for him. But he doesn't need that anymore, because he's going to be a good passer in this league.
Well, I think also part of it, and then this transition to the fantasy angle on this, Adam, is that the offensive line still a work in progress. The weapons clearly are not there for the Bears, and that's something we hope to see improve in this offseason. But when you start to look at it, we're going to start to turn the page on 2023 when we start to look ahead. Do you think Justin Fields is a top 5 quarterback next year?
In a 4-point per passing touchdown, absolutely. 6-point per passing touchdown league, I don't know. I don't think he's any lower than 6 or 7, but there are just some really good pocket passers. Are you going to put him ahead of Not going to put it ahead of Mahomes or Josh Allen. So then what about Herbert? No, he's not a top 5 quarterback. Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, I think they're all ahead of him. He'll be in that next group with Lamar Jackson and maybe Trevor Lawrence if this continues. No, I don't think top 5, but I do think he has number 1 potential. So if you want to draft him on upside, then I could see the justification there.
I could see a better offensive line. I could see a better receiving core sort of pushing him into that range. But yes, it's going to be a very fun position to debate because of a lot of those guys. So he could take that Jalen Hurts leap that we've seen, that Lamar Jackson leap that we saw, once upon a time when he was MVP. But if you're running for 1,000 yards, it's hard to get past what Justin Fields can be. And as Pete alluded to, if the passing continues to improve, he's going to be a superstar. A couple other quarterback storylines we're keeping an eye on here. So it sounds like Russell Wilson's going to return for the Broncos. I don't think anybody's going to change their opinion on the Broncos. We'll see if Cortland Sutton's able to return as well. But hopefully Jerry Jeudy will have a big game like we saw 2 games ago when those guys connected for 2 of the 3 touchdowns that Jeudy scored. So maybe that rapport will carry over to a big game for the Broncos and the Rams in Week 16 on CBS on Christmas Day. And then you have the Jets. Robert Saleh saying today that it's probably going to be tough for Mike White to get back on the field. So, Pete, your just assessment of Zach Wilson and what you saw from him taking over for Mike White and just, almost getting the Jets to have a miraculous, comeback there after the Lions stole the game from late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there were some really good things he did in that game, and there were some really bad things like the interception. The interception was terrible. He floated the ball out there, should have never happened. Just a bad throw. But I thought he was a little bit better. He's a little more sure. And you saw in that last drive, he hit Garrett Wilson in the middle of the field. He had another big play down the field to Garrett Wilson earlier in the game. So I think there's opportunities for him to continue to grow. One thing, Garrett Wilson keeps getting angry with him every single time he misses him. That's something that you look at it and you go, come on, Garrett, you got to stop that. He just keeps doing it over and over again, throwing his hands in the air. You can't do that because he's a young quarterback learning how to play. I get it. Sometimes he's frustratingly inaccurate, but he was better on Sunday, I thought, for the Jets.